Hello and welcome to another episode of Future Learners. My name is Brett Campbell. I am the Chairman and CEO of Euka Future Learning, and I am joined by my amazing co-host, as always, the founder and the head of education here at Euka, Alan Brown. How are you, Alan?
Very well, thank you, Brett.
Tell you what, I could almost do that intro with my eyes shut now. We're approaching 15 episodes, I believe. We'll be close to it right now. And we're full steam ahead. So firstly, thank you to everyone who is listening and has been tuning in, and especially those families. You get 2 bonus points because you have left a 5-star review. We really appreciate that. And if you have shared this podcast with someone or you've introduced this podcast to someone else, you get 5 bonus points because, sharing's caring. That's what my mum always used to tell me. And who doesn't like to share, right? So, Alan, we're going to be talking about a really touchy subject, I will say. And I want to start by playing a game with you first, okay?
Sure.
And this is called Finish My Sentence.
Okay.
Money doesn't grow on
Trees.
Money is the root of
All evil.
Right. So we could go on and on here, and I bet you anyone playing the game at home would have been able to finish those sentences as well, right? And if you haven't guessed it already, we can actually talk about the concept of money and financial literacy. Because myself and you have had a number of conversations about this outside of the podcast, and there's so much to unpack when it comes to this. There's a reason why pretty much 99%, I haven't met anyone who actually cannot finish the sentence, money doesn't grow on trees, right? And you got to think about that. There's some depth into that actual thinking, and that to me, when I hear that, it's like money doesn't grow on trees, it means it's really hard to come by. So we're going to dive into money. We're going to dive into financial literacy and how it impacts our young children and young adults as they're evolving in the world. And then, of course, how that sort of how and where we can and where we do play a role in the education of financial literacy. Right. So let's start by, if you can just. Let's create a baseline of what is financial literacy to start with. What does that even mean?
Well, look, that's really having a good understanding around how we get money, what we do with money, and, how to make money work for us. So that's something that wasn't necessarily in the curriculum when you and I were at school, Brett. I think we did a little bit of wants and needs in Year 7 commerce, but that was about it for me anyway. I don't know about your schooling life. And thankfully, we've certainly got an opportunity now to give kids a much better understanding about financial literacy than perhaps we had when we were young.
Yeah, well, at my school, it's actually quite interesting because I come from a family with very little money. So when I was 4 years old, we lived in a caravan park in Gosford in New South Wales and Sydney, and we lived in a fairly low socioeconomic area when we moved out of there. And I always say the reference of, if you've ever seen the movies Once We're Warriors, which is a New Zealand movie, sort of the streets and the town that this show was sort of set in. I grew up in an environment very similar to that. However, one thing I always will say is, we always had shoes on our feet when I decided to wear them, and a hot meal and a roof over our head, right, and clean clothes. So, I certainly didn't come with a silver spoon in my mouth, but over years and over my development and my journey I really started to, because when I was a kid, I just pined for money. I was like, why can't we have money? Why can't I have stuff? And it wasn't even money. I was like, why can't I have stuff? Why can't I have this? Why can't I have that? And I had friends who, they would have the cool school bags, and they'd have the cool shoes and hats and all those things. I was like, I used to go to my friend's house to play computer games because I didn't have one, right, in the early years. And I was led to believe that money was so hard to come by, and, it was all these things that we're saying at the start, root of all evil and da-da-da-da-da, and only rich people are bad people. And so I come from this parent, and my school itself, there was no one in school. There was like maybe 1 or 2 people that would class as rich in our school. So they were sort of the exemplaries of, their family of what it was like to have money. And, they had a Holden Club Sport car, right? That was sort of the thing. And at school, I was not taught money. Although I will say, I'll preface this by saying in primary school, in my early years, I did remember my mum giving me $1. Like every second Wednesday or something, the bank lady would come to school and I'd take $1 and I'd put it in. We'd all line up in a school hall, and we'd take $1 up, and I'd get my little checkbook out of my bank book, and I'd add $1 to that, so I had about $12, and it was hilarious. But so whilst we had that, we weren't really taught about that. Like, I had no idea what it was. To me, it felt like someone was just taking my money. I'm like, why would I not? So sometimes I wouldn't even put the $1 in the bank account to the lady. I'd use it for the school canteen because I'd rather get the reward now. Anyway, so that being said, we've definitely agreed upon, and I think it's apparent, there's many things that are missing in the schooling curriculum per se, or at least the depth of, okay? Because the question is, how hard do you go, or how finite do you go about teaching children about money, right? And how much of it, the history of money, is important. And I only literally learned about the history of money about 5 years ago when I took a deep dive down into history and realized, where does money even come from, right? Like, everyone thinks that there's this magic money printer, and essentially there technically is right now. The world's in absolute massive debt chaos. But it starts with that history and understanding, what's money used for? Where's it beneficial? Should you have it? Should you not? Should you have a drive for money? In public right now, in society, there's almost this condemning behavior from certain people where it's like, if you aspire to be rich or you aspire to have lots of money, that's a bad thing. And it took me many, many years to work through what I call my money mindset. And I want to sort of unpack money mindset a little bit here, because I think it's really valuable. Because, for several years I was teaching, workshops around business themselves, but also money was a real big parameter of it. Because the reason why most business owners never succeed is because they have a real bad wiring. They have a bad money blueprint, right? They've taken their beliefs from childhood that they've been exposed to, or throughout their early adolescent years, and they've brought it into their adult life, and they're making decisions based off habits that are not propelling them or getting them closer to where they would desire to be, right? So I want to break down the money mindset a little bit and provide a little bit of extra context for our listeners as well. But before I do, is there anything else you want to preface that you'd like to discuss and work through today?
Well, look, I think what you're talking about there about the money mindset will be a really valuable starting point, because even the starting point with helping children with financial literacy, it comes from parents feeling comfortable about talking about money. So there's no doubt that's the place to start. There's no point having a curriculum full of great financial literacy lessons if kids aren't able to see the real life action of the way money works in our families. So that's where it really needs to start. I know some of the things that we talk about within the program itself are things like money basics and budgeting and investing. Even entrepreneurship is something that we talk about with the students themselves as well. Look, I'd definitely like to say that one of the most important things when you're talking to, about financial literacy and how parents can help students or their children with that is basically having a good money mindset themselves. It always has to start with the parents themselves feeling comfortable about money so that they can begin to share that wisdom with their children. And that will then mean that it leads on to the things that we do within the Euka program in financial literacy lessons.
Yeah, that's the nail on the head there. Is you could teach your child a new way of thinking or a new way about money, or they could be exposed to new ways about money, but if they're seeing it in real time displayed in a different format or a different way of realization in the family life, then it's going to be very hard for them to be able to truly grasp what is right, what is wrong, or what is the way in which I should be approaching money, etc. So it definitely starts with yourself. We actually talked about this in our previous episode where we talked about physical and mental health. And yeah, everything we essentially do talk about. And I actually get excited. I like this sort of stuff because Ayla, my daughter, 3 years old right now, going on 16. And she's at that stage where I can teach and I can learn, I can develop and create, and she's starting to understand it a lot more. Obviously, still light years away of really understanding the depth of it, but at the very least, if you can expose them to the surface, it'll create that next sort of layer of keen interest, so to speak. So the first thing that I'll jump into, and this is a real basic format, a framework of, how we can look at anything in most cases. So it's called TFAR, right? It's an acronym. So you'll know what I'm talking about when I share it. So as we know, and there's a few nuances to this, but I won't go too deep dive into it, but your thoughts create a feeling, your feelings then create an action, and your actions then create results. Okay? So I'll say that again. So let's say you had a thought about something, right? Like let's say I got a lotto ticket and I just looked at the numbers and they lined up. My thought would be, oh my gosh, I've just won the lotto. I've just won $20 million, right? My feeling would be, oh my goodness, that like I'd probably run around, do a backflip. I'd be checking. I might be, am I doubtful about this? I do need to double check this, that. And then that's going to create an action. I'm going to be getting up out of my seat, of course, that feeling of excitement. You try and be unbelievably excited and then not create an action that forces you to move. So then I'm going to be up and I'm going to be running around the place, and then that's going to create a result, okay? That result, if I don't go too crazy, should result in me not hurting myself. But it's going to create a result of, you know what? I think I might buy another lotto ticket because I've had an experience that I've won here. I'm going to go back. Now, if you won $20 million, you're probably not going to go down that route. You shouldn't buy any more lotto tickets unless you're addicted to the lotto ticket, which is another conversation within itself. But if we can understand and look through a framework of what you think about, what your thoughts are, they will lead to a feeling, which will lead to actions and lead to results, right? If you ever thought of being scared, if you ever thought that something's like not right, or you hear a noise in the house one night and you're like, what is that? And you get a feeling of being scared, your action's probably going to be freeze up, hide under the pillow, or get your baseball bat out, whatever it is. And then that's going to lead to a result. And it's probably going to be, oh no, noises outside equal bad. Next time I hear noises outside, it's all bad. And that's what creates and embeds ways of thinking and habits into our mindset. So if you have a thought and it's related to money, right? This whole concept of, money is so hard to come by, then you're going to get a feeling of, well, if it's so hard to come by, I'm probably not going to, what am I going to do about it? I'm not going to probably pursue anything. And because I don't deserve money, or we don't have money, our family doesn't have money, or money is bad, money is evil. So you're not going to take any action to go and earn any money or try and find more money out there in the world, which again is the result is going to be, you're going to be where you are right now. So if we look at the money mindset, there's really three areas that I just want to touch upon. And for the sake of this podcast, without turning this into a day-long seminar, there's really three areas where our children and ourselves, but I'll speak from our children's perspective, are going to learn about money, okay, indirectly. And that is their verbal programming, okay? So the verbal programming, like, what do you hear? So this is where the money doesn't grow on trees. Money's hard to come by. What do you think I'm made of money? All of these ones, right? Then there's going to be the modeling. So what did you see? Like, what do you see? Does your family spend lots of money? Is your family super frugal and it never spends money, like it wouldn't buy something? And we've all had these certain experiences. Like, I had a really good mate of mine. His modeling of money was easy come, easy go. As soon as he got it, he'd get paid on Thursday and he'd had no more money by Saturday. He'd be like, I can't come out on the weekend because I spent all my money, because he just easy come, easy go, right? For me, one of my modeling, and I'd love to hear some of yours as well, my modeling as I was growing up was money was really hard to come by. So whenever I came by it, I had to save it for a rainy day. I had to put it away. I had to hold it because I was like, I don't want this feeling of not having money. So it created this saving mechanism in my mind. And even to this day, I have in my mind, I have to have a certain amount of money that I feel comfortable about if I was to have no more money around me or wasn't going to earn it. So as a kid, it was, I wanted to get $100 in my bank account. I was like, I never went under $100 in my bank account because of my paradigm of money was so hard to come by that I have to hold it for an emergency, right? What was some of your modeling that you experienced?
Well, look,
like, what did you see?
it was really quite interesting because money was something you weren't allowed to talk about, firstly. So I didn't have any concept of money. And the other thing was because we never talked about money, I didn't think that it was something I had control over or even had an opportunity to choose about how much you earn. I just assumed that it's just something that we just don't talk about. So I had absolutely no teaching about money from home at all. We certainly didn't get much more than the basics, but it was just the way it was. And so even thinking that you have an opportunity to decide how much you want to earn or what jobs you want to do and the different incomes, none of that was talked about at all at home. So no idea.
Yeah, and modeling is not just about money, right? Modeling in itself, and all of these three areas that I'm going to go through. So there's the verbal programming, obviously, then there's the modeling of what you see. And then the last one is the moments of like, what did you actually experience? So modeling is one thing, so you can see how things occur around money, but then there's the actual moments that you experience personally. So when I talk about money, and again, I'll preface by saying, I've run workshops around this, so I've spoken and thought about money deeply on all levels of the spectrum. And one of the stories that I share, which was a moment for me, which instilled in me that if I want something, I've got to work for it. Okay. And this is a lesson, and we'll all have these lessons, but this one really sings true to me. So I was 16, and I'd already, at about 11 years old, I had a desire for money, and the outcome at that time was to generate $1 worth of 20-cent pieces so I could play Street Fighter, which is quite funny. I have a Street Fighter arcade game in my office, again, which ties back to, there's so many things there. And then $1 so I could get jet plane lollies. So all I wanted was every day to be able to have $2. So when I got home from school, I could walk down to my fish and chip shop and I could generally clock means finish the game of Street Fighter, and get to the end boss and win it with $1. And that was how I got really good, because before I had any 20-cent pieces, even 20-cent pieces, I'd ask them, hey, can I have 20 cents? No, we ain't got any lying around. I'd become really good at the game because I'd ask my friends if I could have their sort of second round on the game. So I become known to go, if someone lost their first round, you only get 2 lives, right? And if someone lost the first life, they'd give me their second so I could then take them to the third round where they might be able to get past. Now, I share that simply because I was forced to get good at the game, or else no one was ever going to give me a life of theirs, right? So I could finish the game for $1. So I had a $2 remit. That was my vision of money. I was like, I just want $2 so I can get $1 worth of lollies and jet planes. So I'd literally walk up and down my street, knock on every door, ask for jobs. Does anyone have any jobs? And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, and the impact of that and how that really shaped my way, and my, let's call it an obsession of money, right? And not just to accumulate it, but to understand it in many ways. So the initial story, though, I was 16. I had sort of part-time jobs. I'd always worked, and I wanted a TV for my birthday. And it was a 21-inch TV, and it was a box, like the big square boxes. And it was $400, and it was on sale at Retrovision, which is a appliance shop down the road from us. And it was $400. And I said to my mum, can I have a TV for my birthday? And she goes, if you save up half of it, I'll pay for the other half. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, okay, what have I got to do? How many lawns do I have to mow? Or how many gardens do I have to pick weeds out of? What can I charge? To get $200. I got my $200 just in time for my birthday. and I gave it to my mum, and she went down. My birthday comes around, and I get the TV, and I open the TV, and I go to put the TV into my bedroom, plug it in, and I'm like, oh no, I couldn't get any channels because it didn't have an aerial. And I was like, oh, Mum, it doesn't have an aerial. She goes, well, you're going to have to go down and get one. I said, what do you mean? She goes, you have to go to Retrovision and get an aerial. I'm like, oh, okay. I said, how much are they? She goes, I don't know. I said, oh, can I have $20? She goes, no. I said, I'd pay for half your TV. You're going to have to come up with the rest. You're going to have to come up with the money yourself if you want your TV to work. I was like, oh my goodness. Like, and the aerial was like $15 or something, but I literally had to work the next week before I could actually access my TV a week later, right? Now, I share that because, and I don't want this to make it sound like my mum didn't give me nothing, because that was her giving what she could, right? At the time, I didn't understand, and I was probably said some silly things like, I felt like I was missing out, and why all this, and oh, why can't you just buy it for me, blah, 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 blah. But it is those lessons that has, really shaped the way in which I look at a lot of things. And it's that concept of hard work, and not necessarily just hard work, fingers to the bone, but that was an example of a moment that I experienced. So it was outside of modeling, right? That's a moment. You have moments where it viscerally moves you when you see certain things. Like the day I gave someone money and I loaned money for the first time to someone was such an amazing, it was a feeling that you can't describe, because you're actually helping someone else out. Because I had all these moments of, if someone had just loaned me $15 for that aerial, so I knew the feeling of it. So moments are an amazing process that if we can go back through, and we can quickly see how we've been shaped. So any moments from your perspective that you experienced that had maybe embedded or created some money mindsets for you?
Look, I guess I'm thinking of one that's sort of not quite so far back, as far as when I had young children, and all of a sudden that topic of pocket money came up, and they said, our friend gets pocket money, and what they have to do is they have to make their bed, and they have to keep their room clean. And it just didn't sit right with me. I thought, well, hold on a minute. These are the things we do because we're part of a family, and we all need to pull our own weight to be part of a family. I don't think I should be paying you to do things that I would expect you to do as part of a family. So it was at that moment when sometimes when you're a parent of young ones and you haven't actually thought, well, how am I going to shape my children with money, and how am I going to do this whole, pocket money thing? And so like your mum, it was, if you want to earn some money, then you can go and find some jobs from people who want to pay you money, rather than doing things that we would expect as being part of a family at home. Now, there's some jobs that weren't their normal part of their life, like, perhaps washing the windows of my car or something like that. Yes, there's some special, we used to call them bobber jobs. I don't know, I think that's an olden day term for money. But, and there's some special jobs. But at the end of the day, I figure, if they're going to be needing some money and wanting some money, I want them to start looking and saying, well, what are my skills and talents, or what have I got in my own hands that I can earn some money? So it's the first time I'd ever considered, wait, pocket money, what does that mean? How am I gonna work that one out? So, yeah.
And a couple of other nuances to look at as it pertains to moments. Just because you've experienced, or it was a moment for you and that taught you a great lesson, it doesn't mean that is how you need to embed it into your children either, right? Because we live in a very different world than 30, 40 years ago, right? So things change. We're evolving, and I was speaking with a friend the other day. We're out for a walk, and I said, isn't it an interesting journey that we're on, where I will quite often check myself and say, I'm only saying that because that's what my mum used to say to me, or my stepdad used to say to me. So I haven't even thought if that's a good thing to even say or do. I've just gone, well, you want to do that, you can do this. No, you can't have that. So when it came to food, right, as an example, and this is sort of related to money because it feeds back into money, right? It's like, don't waste your food. Like, don't waste your food. It's a waste of a food. What do you mean it's a waste of a food? Like, if I don't want to eat that, and there's a difference of a kid just saying, no, I don't want it, I want to skip to ice or whatever. But there was certain times where I was just like, I just don't want to eat that. And it's like, no, you've got to eat it. It's a waste otherwise. I'm like, do you know how much tomatoes cost? Or do you know how much this costs? It's like, I got no idea how much it costs, and I've got no relative concept, to be fair. But you look at that, and one of the things so Ayla, she was eating, and she's like, oh, I don't like this. And I was like, no, you're going to eat it. And I'm like, what am I, like, is that what I truly believe, or is that me carrying a belief that I've had as I was growing up? Because, it all worked out for me, to be fair. And I mean, I've got my issues, but don't worry about that. So, and this is where money is very important, because majority of the time, the parent will just self-impose their beliefs, and rightfully so, because that's all you know, right? That's what your belief is around money. And it's the question that I would always say is, the first part is, do you want to explore a different way of looking at money with your family? That's probably the first step, right? It's the admission of, what, I'd actually be open to it. Like, so if we look at that again through another just thinking framework of how we could sort of start the process for you, is you firstly just need to be aware of what your current mindset of money is, right? We all have it. It's interesting, like, there's certain things that I will spend money on and not even look at the price, right? Within reason, of course, right? So things that I will always spend money on is experiences. So like, if it's a holiday, or if it's something to do with friends or family or something, I'll always try and pick up the bill. I'll always be like, I want to do that because it's an experience, right? But I won't go and buy a $7 something at Woolworths because I don't see the value in that. So same, but it's I'm putting that monetary outcome into the experience, right? So experiences and skipping the line or skipping the queue is where I'm always happy to spend money, because time is money, and if I can get to the front of a line by paying more money, then I'll that's something I endeavor. Yet I'll walk around in a $20 t-shirt, $50 shoes. So we've got areas where we spend money and where we reserve. So a great exercise, and it's actually fun to go through this, because you'll probably look at yourself and go, oh yeah, I do that. I can't. That's weird. I'd probably feel like changing that, actually, now that you're aware of it. So there's certain things that you do with money, and look at the awareness of that, but then actually understand that is not you, right? That is just a habit that you've created, and it's just something that you've been carrying around, and you can easily shift, or you could easily change that habit, right? By architecting, what is a new way that I'd like to look at this, right? Is it that you just, your value, your lens and how you seek value is different? Or is this just because your mum said this, or your dad said this, or a caregiver said this to you as you're growing up, and that's just something you've brought through? So truly understanding your mindset and the quirks that you have surrounding money. One of those definitely is, are you uncomfortable talking about money? Because if you're uncomfortable talking about money, that's something that really needs to be looked at as to why it's uncomfortable for you. Because you're not going to be able to move forward and sit down and have open, honest conversations with your child about money if you're like, oh, and you hear your parents in the background saying something, or you hear a friend going, saying something. So you really got to get that understanding there. And then get clear on what are the new habits that you just want to create. Just pick one, right? So an example might be, you have a belief that you don't deserve money because you think that what you do is, I don't deserve money for whatever reason, okay? The reframe on that is truly trying to understand, why don't you? So if you had to make up some reasons as to why you don't deserve money, what are they? And someone will sit there and they might say, my job isn't, I don't do an important enough job. It's like, okay, well, that's what you believe. But if you didn't do your job, what would actually happen, right? Who would be out of a service, or who would be out of a product, or who would be out of an experience if you weren't to do that? And then you might go, well, yes, actually my job is important, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm still only getting paid X, Y, Z. If you desire more money, then the reality is the pathway for that is you then go out and seek what monetary number is it in your mind that you'd like to seek for. Then you can then go and seek for what type of jobs or what type of businesses or what type of service can I provide. And then you're like, well, I don't know how to do all that. Then you go, well, what do I need to learn? Who do I need to become in order to be able to help me get towards that? Now, that was a lot just digested there and obviously in 15 minutes, trying to pack in as much as I can around some useful things on how we can start to think about money. But I want to, anything to touch on there, Alan, that I shared, and then I'd love for you to sort of get into if we assume that us as parents, we're starting to get our money mindset right, we're considering it, we're looking at it through a different lens, then how do we revert that back into the education of money for our children? But anything else to touch on there?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things you were talking about is really examining your own thoughts around money. And sometimes we learn things as our children are learning them. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where, your child's looking at something and asks a question, you think, I don't know, I'll find out. And so even though you may not have really got your whole financial literacy down pat yourself, as your kids are going through that, as they're growing up and going through learning these types of things, you'll find that it'll challenge you as you go. So I can just speak to just broadly what we do in Euka as far as financial literacy. So, all schools have financial literacy, little parts of it as part of the maths program. And then perhaps when they get to high school, perhaps in commerce or business studies, things like that. What Euka does is we put some financial literacy as part of the lessons from foundation, 5 years old. That's where they start talking about money basics. They'll learn things like savings and earnings and spending money, which is really handy. I'll just tell you, the other day I was with my grandchild and we were in the shop. He's 6 and he saw something he really wanted. And I said, oh, no, I don't have any money with me at the moment. He said, it doesn't cost anything. You just put your card on. And I thought, okay, yes, he obviously needs some money basics. So that's foundation 1, grade 2, we're talking about things like that. And then grade 3 and 4, we start talking about things like budgeting, like how you allocate money for different purposes. And that will challenge you as a parent to start thinking about, well, do I do that? Like, that's a good start. Getting up to year 5 and 6, we talk about savings, investing. We even talk to kids about simple interest and what stocks look like and things like that. By the time they're in year 6, we're starting to talk about those in a really basic way. And then, you might think, oh, needs and wants, we should have covered those right at the beginning. And I said to you before, I remember doing that in year 7 commerce. But we do save that to high school. And that's probably because everything is a need. Every want is a need before you get to high school. Everything that you really want is really needed when you're small. And so we really can start to identify the difference between needs and wants by the time we get into about year 7. We start really looking at priorities with our money. And then finally, when we're getting up into the year 9s and 10s kind of age, we're talking about what do we do to earn money? How can we earn money? Entrepreneurship, as well as careers, and helping kids to find creative ways and looking at what skills they got and things like that. So as your child's moving through their schooling, you'll be forced to also focus on some of these aspects as well.
Yeah, one of the big things that I'll share that I think is so important, and one that I'll be personally doing my best to instill the best that I can is create the feeling of abundance. Now, abundance of money doesn't necessarily mean the amount of money you have. It's the feeling and the ability to not lock down or limit someone's capacity and dreams around money. So as a kid, I wish I don't wish so, but there's TikTok people doing this now on TikTok. And I was doing this 30 years ago. I was walking around to people's houses and I'd just knock on their door and go, what do you do? like the big houses. I'd go, because I was like, how do you have a house like this? Like, what do you do? That's maybe what I need to do. I need that job, or I need this. because I was just so curious. Like, what do you do? What do you do for a job? Funnily, now we fast forward to today, and there's kids making a lot of money on TikTok with those videos, just asking people what they do. Anyway, so, but creating this abundance, because I always knew there was an abundance, just not within my own initial remit, because I was like, well, if it's out there, then surely it is. But not all people or not all children have that that mindset of thinking externally as well. So whilst I was brought up in an environment with no money, I always had an aspiration and desire that there has to be more. There is more here. There's got to be something here. And that's why I had so many jobs as a kid. Like, there are so many jobs that I've had that I couldn't even list them all right now. And it was nothing to do with the job. I would have washed the bottom of your car, I would have crawled under your car and cleaned it if you needed to, if I could earn $1, right? But at the very least, knowing that there is an abundance, there's so much money in the world, and there's so much opportunity for people to be a part of it in many ways. And having that abundance mindset within yourself, or at the very least explaining to your child, look, we can't have this because of we're at this stage, we're not going to do this because of this, and like an explanation around it. You'll be so surprised how far it will go in them understanding. And to your point where you talk about budgeting and so forth, I have a P&L for my family, right? So a profit and loss statement, meaning, now I don't go to the granular of every single thing gets out of, but I'm like, okay, so this is the money that we have available. This is where we can spend it. This is where we allocate it. This is what we're happy to do here, right? So that this is a savings. This is for wealth creation, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all part of a process that I'm not needing to lay there at night going, oh, geez, what's going to happen here? Can I do that? It's either, no, I can't do that because I don't have the current availability of money for it, right? So, but what you'll quickly identify is when you put that plan in place, you go, okay, yeah, we want to go on a holiday. Okay, where's the holiday? Where do we want to go? What's the rough cost of that? Oh, it's going to cost $10,000, let's say. And we're like, oh, we're going to have to go in 5 years. But what if you could figure out how you could go sooner? What could you do? Would you have more emphasis in whether it's saving or cutting back on things that you realize? And again, I hear this a lot. People say, oh, just cut out one coffee a day. I know it's hard to cut out your coffee. There might be some other things that you can cut out, right? There you can save $50 here, $100 there. How many subscriptions we got here, there, and there. And again, this isn't about trying to cut costs necessarily, because I'd much try and encourage you to increase costs, which means you need to increase abilities of generating income from other places potentially. But again, this all comes down to what you desire as a family. And we talked about this in previous episodes about sitting down and go, what do we want our family to look like, right? And even down to the point, what car would you like to drive? And I know even talking about this for some people is like, oh, you want a nice car, I can't afford it, you don't understand. But that's not what this is about. This is about setting some goals and targets for you as a family. And then sitting down and go, one thing you said, and how this comes back to our children, is what is your framework for money going to be with your children, or what is it for your children already? Like when you said, you shouldn't be paying kids to make their bed or do this or do that, my initial thing is, I actually, if implemented correctly, I think it's a great way to be able to showcase to your child that you do X, you can get Y. Now, there's going to be some things it's like, no, making your bed's mandatory. You're not getting paid to make your bed. But one thing, for an example, that I really like, and I heard a really successful person speak about a couple of years ago, and he pays his children to read books. He goes, look, for every book you read and you create a report on the back of that book, you get $20 or you get $10 or you get whatever it is, right? It could be $1. But you're encouraged, like that's the best way to steer, because you're empowering your child to learn and they're getting paid and they're understanding. And so there's so many cool little fun things, and you don't need to have lots of spare change. You could start with 20-cent pieces. Like for me, when 20 cents would have been amazing. It's just the currency of exchange, because that's all money is. Money is just the currency of exchange. For all we know, there might not be anything called the dollar, and we go back to agri-beads, which was the initial starting of transaction back hundreds of years ago when the financial situation really started. Shame on the English with what they did with the agri-beads. Go and research that. It's a very, very interesting on how money eventuated. So, Ellen, what else do we need to share about this? I know I feel like I've been a rambling mess today talking about all this stuff, because I love this topic so much, and I want to try and pack in as much as we can. But I also realize it's a very, very important and very widespread subject. So what else do we need to touch on here before we wrap up this episode?
Look, I guess I would finish off by saying that if money is something that you look at now and you think, oh my goodness, I've kind of blown it. The kids are a bit older now and we haven't talked about money, and there's no time like the present. It's not something that it's not all over Red Rover. Even if your kids aren't even in the house anymore, you still got time to say, you know what, I've been thinking about this and this is what I'm learning. I'd love to share that with you. So I guess feeling comfortable about talking to your kids about money. Now, that's not overloading them with the stress of the bills necessarily. I think you've got to have a boundary. I think that's really important, having some kind of boundary, but letting them understand that things do cost money while they're young, and that that money gets sorted out for different things and priorities, and just feeling like you can start today. If this is a new thing for you, thinking about money and feeling like this is something you want to share with your kids, then you can still start today. So no time like the present.
Yeah, and that goes hand in glove for everything, right? It's get stuck in now, and you'll be surprised what eventuates from it, right? So, all right. Well, on that, thank you very much, Ellen. I appreciate doing this podcast with you as always, and to our amazing listener, hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you do, please share it with someone. Give us your feedback. Let us know if you'd like us to dive into the topic of money even a little bit deeper. There's, again, lots more to share there. And we'd also love to hear how you treat money in your household. Let us know. How do you maybe motivate or encourage your children? So let us know. We'd love to hear about it. Until then, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next episode.